Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you very much for making the trip to Toronto. I know you have a very busy schedule, and so Minister, maybe before we sort of get into the broader isotope discussion, really where I was hoping we could start today's dialogue is really for you to just talk about Saskatchewan. It's a province that has, I think, very ambitious plans. I see you and your premier and colleagues all around the world engaging in trade. And so maybe before we just talk about isotopes, just coming from the government of Saskatchewan, your ambitions for the province and really what you're driving to in terms of the future of the province of Saskatchewan.
Well, thanks so much, James, for the invitation here to be in front of such a distinguished group of professionals. Actually, I'm quite intimidated as a farm boy from Saskatchewan. I just feel like I'm amongst a room of greatness here. But you know, the one thing about Saskatchewan is that we're a province of firsts. We're very proud of our history. Certainly when it comes to the nuclear industry, we say it's part of our DNA. And in fact, it's part of my DNA, nuclear energy. My uncle was a nuclear engineer at Chalk River from the 60s to the early 2000s. So we have a long history in that space. But I'd say the one thing about Saskatchewan as well is that what everyone would experience is that we're a very innovative, problem-solving, collaborative province. And we'll talk about that more, I think, as we get through our conversation. But I'll just go through my ag background as one example. We have the most sustainable crops produced really on Earth, and that's due to some of the technology that producers in Saskatchewan developed in the 70s and 80s to go through what we call direct seeding or zero tillage agriculture. So because of that, we were able to plant a crop in soils that are untilled, and therefore we're adding more fertility, adding more organic matter, and really are the most sustainably produced crops around the world. And that's just technology that was developed in a farm shop. And that's kind of our mentality, is we like to do things, provide practical solutions for any problem that we see in front of us. And certainly Sylvia Fedorik is one of those pioneers that we're very proud of. In fact, I think we've named the Sylvia Fedorik Center after her. Fun fact, she was also our lieutenant governor in the province. With the work that she did, I know in the cobalt-60 therapy unit, also found out on the weekend that the first patient that she treated was my brother-in-law's grandmother.
Wow.
And so that's how closely related we are in the province, about 1 to 2 degrees of separation.
Okay.
That's how we get things done, right? We know somebody. So I guess, that's some of the great work that we've seen there, and we're very proud of the work that Sylvia Fedorik has done, and ultimately the work that, that carries on, that legacy that carries on from there. I know Dr. Jeter Hall spoke yesterday on, certainly represented the Sylvia Fedorik Center very well, and I know I've got notes here, and I want to make sure that we give him and the organization credit for some of the work that they did. 2024, I think at the CNIC Awards, the Fedorik Center with their partners won the 2024 Ecosystem Innovation Award. So that's the first organization in Canada to produce actinium-225 using a cyclotron and 226 targets. So again, that's the kind of groundbreaking work that we're very proud of what's going on in our province.
That's great, Minister, and I love the connection to agriculture. So, as you know, I live in Bruce County, so we always have a saying when we're dealing with a challenge at Bruce Power is we say we want farmer smart, not Harvard smart. Although the problem with that is we actually started recruiting some people from Harvard that worked at Bruce Power. So, I said, we actually want Harvard smart too. So somebody got me a joke of a T-shirt once, and they said, Harvard smart, not Harvard smart. And then when we had these people join Bruce Power, I had to get the T-shirts remade to say Farmer Smart and Harvard Smart. So anyway, but all joking aside, I think that perspective is really important, because if you look at a lot of the organizations that are here in the room today, and I think our introductory speaker talked about this, we're very successful when we get a small group of people together we have relationships, and new relationships we're forming and existing relationships, and we find a way to get things done. And you can define that however you want, but that's really our opportunity. And I think that's always great about being in Canada is we're large enough to be able to do the big things, but not so large that we can't really take advantage of our agility. Minister, I want to spend a couple of minutes and talk about your nuclear industry in Saskatchewan. So, oftentimes we like to talk about our nuclear fleet here in Ontario. That nuclear fleet is providing in Ontario not only electricity but a large source of isotopes. We have our friends from New Brunswick Power here, again, really important facility. Can you talk about the role of the province of Saskatchewan? Because fundamentally, Saskatchewan is where all of this starts with mining and fuel.
Well, that's certainly the basis to all of this is the source of uranium, and I know Saskatchewan has 20% of the world's uranium. We've been at this again probably for just over 60 years. I have family members who've actually worked in the uranium industry in the 70s, and so we have the world's also richest source of uranium, all found in northern Saskatchewan. Two big players right now, Cameco and Orano, very important partners in the uranium extraction process and early stage refining. Just in the last few months, we've had two new companies, NextGen and Denison, that are approved for uranium mines, and we've just in the process of seeing a third one go through the approval process. So we certainly have the basis for that, and that's the uranium extraction business. We have one of the world's foremost freight forwarders responsible for moving nuclear products around the world, and that's TAM International. Very big part of our uranium industry. We've got SRC, Sask Research Council, that's been involved in a lot of the original point research on uranium development. Also involved in rare earth element extraction. Very proud of the work that they're currently going through there now. We've also got our SRC also had the slowpoke reactor, one of the first ones, I believe, operating kind of as a research unit that was operating in Saskatoon for a number of years, just got decommissioned here just a few years ago. We have certainly our University of Regina has just in the process of putting in a loop testing system for small modular reactors. I guess, Cameco now is the proud owner of Westinghouse. So we like to say that depends if you're American or Canadian as to which percentage or how much or where the origin of Westinghouse is, because they're 49% shareholders of Westinghouse. So we've got technology now that's actually based out of the Cameco office in Saskatoon, and that's with the Westinghouse reactors. So we play a pretty prominent role, I think, in the industry.
Absolutely, Minister, and I think that's well said. If people have any questions, if I could ask you to go up to the mic, and I'll be sure to work them in. I'll just look for anybody who's at the mic. Please don't be shy. So, Minister, we've talked a lot about sort of the production end. Talked a lot about the linkage to the nuclear industry and the broader piece. I'd like to kind of shift the discussion to one of the components in your portfolio, which is innovation. It's always a pain, by the way, to get innovation in your title, because it means it's kind of could be anything, right? Sure. So you're probably living that, but it's also a great opportunity and super exciting. So Minister, can you just talk about, I know your government has invested, heavily years ago in, for example, a new children's care in the province of Saskatchewan. Spend a few minutes and let's talk about patients and some of the focus the government has had, and maybe where you see some of the areas of challenge for this group to take away and think about in terms of helping patients in Saskatchewan with who are challenged with cancer.
Well, that's a great question, James. And honestly, we spent a lot of time talking about healthcare in Saskatchewan. I don't think we're the only jurisdiction that is certainly struggling with providing healthcare to what our constituents are expecting. And so we have a renewed focus now in our province. Really, it's a patients first mentality, that we want to ensure that our patients are considered first in every decision that's made in the provision of healthcare. And I know, as you talked before, and so many others have talked before, we're all going to be affected by cancer in one way, shape, or form. And how can we provide the best level of service to those that are suffering? Not everyone is able to move to the best, absolute best center of care, somewhere around Canada. We need to ensure that they have access to the best provisions of care that we possibly can. And so I think the more that we can support, the medical isotope business, and we can be that center to get, as we've heard through a number of conversations, we don't have a lot of time to get the products to where they need to be. And I think that's why it's important to focus on being that primary source of production, that ultimately we can provide the best level of care to our patients. And you're right, innovation certainly comes with a lot of expectations that actually you know what you're talking about. So that's the one concern I always have. But we also have an entity called Innovation Saskatchewan. Our CEO, Kerry Harvey, is with us here today. Certainly, I think a lot of people around the room have been introduced or have had conversations with Kerry. And I think what that does is it just allows us to focus on that specific area, is focusing on innovation and ultimately what can we do to support our constituents, to support the industry, to support the researchers, that everyone that's involved in that space. And that's having that entity allows us to provide that focus.
That's great, Minister. And one of the things I wouldn't mind asking you about is for some free advice on behalf of the CNIC. So one of the items that you've seen in a lot of the work we do is advocating to government is a big part of what we do, whether it's at the provincial level. We had the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Energy from Ontario here yesterday. We had folks from Natural Resources and Energy. I see Pam Damoff there. She's the president and CEO of the Pearson Centre, but former member of Parliament and parliamentary secretary. And one of the things, Minister, that I have learned over the years with any individuals who are in public service, who I have immense respect for, is just the number of asks that you receive and the number of stakeholders and people coming forward with ideas. And all of us in the room, we tend to have one or two things that we're waking up focused on every day. And you literally have the items you're focused on as a government, but also literally hundreds and hundreds of incomings. If you were given advice to this group on what we can better do as a policymaker, people that come to you, I mean, you're here, so we're putting you into the ally category, and we did a long time ago. But what advice would you have for us in terms of when we're thinking of how we go to government, the most effective way to do that? When you see people come in, what is most effective in terms of keeping this high on people's agendas?
Well, that's a great question, James, and that's absolutely, we face that every day. I would say pretty easy to identify the problems. It's probably hard to come with solutions. Right. And I think that's probably the first piece of advice I would have is never assume that government knows anything about anything. Right? That's my first core tenet there. And so I think it's important that you come with a bit of background, a bit of an education component to it, but then also what you see as what the potential solutions could be. And I would come with 2 or 3 options as well, because government has always asked for a lot of things that involve significant financing, and we know we're all limited in, as we say, there's only one taxpayer, only one pocket, and that you're being hit through your municipal, provincial, and federal level. So, certainly come with a very concise ask as well. That's probably the most frustrating thing that government has, is that when someone identifies a problem, doesn't really have a solution, and really there is no ask at the end of the day. And I think that's important, is to be able to define and refine that ask and be very specific as to what it might be. And a lot of times what it involves is having someone professional, help bring that idea together. And so just to make sure that it's a very concise, precision ask, so that government doesn't have to do an awful lot of guessing and making a lot of assumptions as to what the ask may be.
Yeah, and Minister, I think that's great advice. And to put it sort of a shameless plug in for the CNIC, everybody in the room, you have contributed in some way, shape, or form to publications such as our Isotopes for Hope package, right? And I think utilizing some of the items that Melody and the team have developed for our sector, to be able to use those as a bit of a foundational piece when you're going in and talking to a minister. So this is how it fits into the big picture. And the minister, I know he says it sort of jokingly as, assume government doesn't know anything. And that's not anything disrespectful to people in government. It's that, you just think in your business and your organization, the number of things that you need to be on top of. Can you imagine if you were in an organization where 50 different businesses from 10 different sectors all are coming in? And how many times has somebody spoken to you and they're pitching you on something and you haven't really even registered some of the core foundational elements that we all take for granted. So taking the time to utilize your role in terms of the broader Canadian ecosystem, I think is what the minister is saying, but also just taking a minute and just level setting everybody, and because you have so much knowledge that sometimes we all assume other people have that same starting point. So I think it's great advice, Minister. I see a question at the microphone, so go ahead.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Decker. I'm representing the company Nuclidium from Switzerland and Germany. And thank you so much, Minister, for coming today, especially from Saskatchewan with the resources of the Canadian Light Source. Would you please speak a little bit about funding leverage, especially for industry, and how industry could take advantage of programs for resources to strengthen development of industry in Canada? Thank you.
Great question.
No, that is a very good question. Thanks, Jennifer. And I know, as we just talked earlier, is that, government has to be very precise, I think, in how they allocate funding. We could provide a little bit of seed funding to all the projects that we deem to be very important, or we could be very selective in how we're going to approach things. And the term center of excellence, I think, is quite often overused, but it still is a great defining point that we need to go and certainly understand our strengths. So certainly in Saskatchewan, we understand our strengths in the medical isotope production side, certainly on the research side, the ecosystem that we've got developed there. So I'd say our focus in Saskatchewan is to make sure that each one of those facilities is able to operate at their full capacity, at their maximum output, to ensure that we've got the best that we can get out of these facilities. Now, as well, we have a partner in the federal government as well. So it's incumbent on us to ensure that we're able to articulate our ask to the federal government, just as I asked everyone here to be very precise in how, what their ask is. We as well have that same responsibility when we go to the federal government to say, hey, we've got these facilities here. They need to be able to operate long term. They need to have some surety. We would love for you to be a partner in ensuring that these facilities are able to operate at max capacity. So I'd say, we each need to find our strengths. And I think as a country, and again, I look around this room today as to who everyone is representing, and I'd say we each have a core strength in our region of the region of the country. And how do we able to get the best out of each one of those? And then how are we best able to facilitate collaboration between all of these regional entities as well, so that we can be that Canadian powerhouse that I think we absolutely have the potential to be.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Minister. I think that's spot on. And maybe just one thought to leave you with, because one of the things that I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but what the heck, right? Is one of the things I've always been told is always leave with an ask. So I'm not going to let you leave without an ask. You don't need to answer, but I'm going to leave an ask. But this is an easy one because I wouldn't do it in front of 400 people if it wasn't. One of the things that I think we have all been really successful as a sector on is making the medical isotope space one that there's a lot of unity on. Like if we can't find unity in medical isotopes, what are we going to find unity on? And if you look at the progress we've made at the provincial level in Ontario, 2 resolutions passed by the Ontario legislature, unanimous, from government, opposition, all parties in support of an isotope strategy. Pam, when she was serving in the House of Commons, again, very strong support through a member statement. Pam, I think people, all sides were standing up and applauding on that. And so, Minister, we would love Saskatchewan to be the first province in Western Canada, have your legislature pass a unanimous resolution in support of isotopes. You can't speak for the opposition parties, but I think this is something we could all, an extra lobby day in Saskatchewan, come working with your leadership to see if we can create that unity, because I think another thing for people in government is we have to find solutions that will outlive any minister, maybe not outlive, that's not the right way of putting it. Outlast, right? Changes. I look at the number of portfolios you've had as an example. Changes in premiers, changes in prime minister. We have to create a dynamic that is withstand the test of all of those changes. And so, Minister, we look forward to coming out to Saskatchewan and seeing if we can get your support to pass a unanimous resolution.
Well, I'm so fortunate to have my Chief of Staff with me today, who did work in EC, who also was responsible for drafting legislation. So I see her writing notes right now. So I think we're well on our way to getting that done.
And let's give them a round of applause in advance on that. That's fantastic. This will be an easy one.
Absolutely.
Anyway, and by the way, ministers, chiefs of staff absolutely hate it, Minister, when I get on stage with them because they try to prepare everything. And I love a minister like this who just wants to talk off the cuff. So thank you, Minister. Really appreciate your leadership, your chiefs of staff's leadership. Sorry, you mentioned there was somebody else in the crowd.
Carrie Harvey, CEO of Innovation
Let's have her stand up, your chief of staff, and give them a round of applause as well. So thank you for joining us and for your support, and thank you, Minister, for your leadership, and we look forward to a continued partnership together. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James.